right, well, we're going to tie our second fly for the day and the final fly for the time bench today. And the first fly we tied, of course, was for bluegill and panfish. Well, this one is too. This is a pattern that I came up with a while back. I have a good friend that had created a little trout pattern that kind of inspired me to take his concept and then develop it into something else for bluegill, because I love to fish for bluegill. And I call it the Dame Hadley. And there's a story behind that name, but I'm not going to go into that. We're going to go into how to tie this fly. What we're going to be using for this fly is a Mustad Signature Series R50 dry fly hook, or dry wet fly actually. This is a little bit heavier wire, can be used for a heavily hackled dry fly or for a wet fly. It's a standard length, a 1X shank in a size 10. And for our materials, we'll be using I've cut a piece of craft foam, a black strip of black foam, regular old craft foam you can buy in the hobby shops. I'm using some round rubber legging material. Now, if you'll notice, there are 4 strands here. I'll be separating those after I get them tied together. And I'm going to use some Peacock dubbing material. This is an ice dubbing, but just look at the flash in that. Now, if that isn't going to catch the attention of a fish, I don't know what will. And then I found a bead chain at a hardware store that was unlike anything I'd ever seen before, and I fell in love with it. It's a holographic. It changes color. And I use that on this fly, and you know what? It's been very effective. But you can use gold or silver or black or whatever you've got in your fly tie material. But next time you're in a hardware store, go look at their bead chains. You might be amazed at what you can find. Okay, now let's get started with this guy. I'm going to use a 6/0 black thread. I need a little bit heavier thread than I normally use, simply because I'm going to be cranking down some pressure on that black foam. Now, I just noticed my thread has gotten over my bobbin here, so I'm going to have to take it off and kind of reposition it, because that, you want to kind of pay attention to that. If it doesn't come straight off like this, you could break your thread when in the process of tying your fly. Well, first thing I want to do is I'm going to put on my thread. And I'm going to build up just a little bit of thread where I want to put my bead chain eyes. I'm going to cut off the excess. And I'm going to take some super glue type glue in a gel form and just put a little drop on there to help my bead chain eyes stay in place. I'm going to take my bead chain with it all connected and just lay it on where I'm going to have 2 eyes, and I'm going to pull it back just a little bit. I don't want to crowd that front too much there. Let's back it up just a little bit here. And once I kind of get them on, then I'm going to take my wire cutters and cut them off. Much easier to handle than trying to handle just those 2. Then do a figure 8 wrap, and that'll make sure that it's going to stay in place. You know, and using that super glue type glue, what really makes that work effectively is the pressure that the thread creates on it. So once you get some good wraps on there, start your wraps then towards the back of the fly, back towards the bend, and build up that thread base that you want. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my thread forward again. I want a good solid base of this thread on here, because we're going to have this heavy foam material, and heavier materials can really twist on the hook if you don't get a good secure base first. Plus, I want to build a nice underbody with that dubbing. And one thing I want to do, I want to make sure, because I'm fishing for panfish who are notoriously bad about tearing up flies, I'm going to put just a little bit of this glue material on the thread before I put my dubbing on. Then I'm going to take a little bit of dubbing wax. This is a dubbing wax that's made by Loon Outdoors called Swax. It's pretty sticky stuff. Works really well. Don't get too much on. It will have a tendency, if you get too much on, to dull that shine in the dubbing. I'm going to take some of that off. I'm trying to get it off of there. There we go. I don't want to get it on my fingers, because if I do, I can't get the dubbing off my fingers. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of this, and I'm just going to drag it along the thread and let that swax grab a hold of it. and then I'm going to spin it. And notice I'm going to spin it one direction. I'm going to wet my fingers just a little bit. Spin it in one direction only. If you spin it back and forth, you're going to spin it right back off the thread. So you only want to go one direction. Now I basically have created a dubbing chenille, or a yarn made with the dubbing. And then I'm going to wrap that towards the back. I want to build up a nice chunky body because I want my fly to look like a tasty morsel. So you see what we have there. We have a nice shiny peacock colored body made with a very durable synthetic material, and it's built up nicely on the hook shank. Now I'm going to take that piece of craft foam, I'm going to tie it in, but I'm going to leave a little stub of it sticking out. So I'm going to tent it by pinching it over the hook shank, bring my thread up, pinch it between my thumb and index finger, and draw down. And then don't draw so tight that you break your thread, but then I'm going to increasingly add more pressure to it, putting on the thread wraps. Now, you see the little stub at the back. Leave that alone for now. Now what we want to do is we want to bring our thread up through that body and make segmentations in our foam. There's one. I'll turn that where you can see that. See that segmentation. You're only going to need 2 or 3 because this isn't a real long-bodied fly. 2. Now I'm going to create one more right behind those bead chain eyes. 3. And right there, I think I'm going to back up. That was a little close. I'm going to stop right there. Pull my foam back. Take my rubber leg material that I had already kind of pre-cut. It's still way longer than I need. And just lay all 4 strands right in there. Take my thread and go up and behind the first ones. Then come back behind these over here towards me and wrap through and just kind of keep figure eighting. And if you want to go in front of the bead eyes, that's okay too. Just so long as you get those in there and secured. Now, once they're secure, kind of level them out to where they stick out to the sides, draw down your thread. Now bring your thread forward, pull your foam forward, draw my thread up here a little shorter, and then come up under the hook eye, and again, increasing pressure with each wrap, slight more pressure, draw that down, and you've got the head created. Now all you have to do is trim off the excess foam. Be careful not to cut your thread. And you also want to make sure you cut it to where it does not cover the hook eye like it's doing right now. You want to clear that off of the hook eye. You want to be able to get your fishing line through there. And don't cut your thread. Then go ahead and make a few more wraps just to really secure that foam in there. Then add a little bit of tying wax. This is for whip finishing. Don't put too much of that on there. You won't be able to draw your whip finish wraps through. And then put on your whip finish and draw it down. Now we got a little bit more detail work to do here. We've got our fly built. Our legs are a little longer than what we want, so I'm going to raise them up to where when I cut them, they cut off the same size. I like them kind of long. And then I'm going to take a bodkin and go ahead and separate these legs out. Just like that. Do the same thing here. Oops. And finally. Then just kind of pull them to really get them all separated nice. Like so. Boy, I tell you, when you see those legs moving in the water, a bluegill or a sunfish of any kind just can't resist. Even bass will grab these guys. Now, because this imitates a damselfly, what I like to do, and I'm going to have to take it out of the vise to do this, I'll do it where you can see it here. I'm going to split this tail into 3 pieces. And I'll show you after I cut them. I'm going to just make a little slice, 2 slices. You see what we have? We have a split 3-piece tail. That represents the 3 gills that are at the back of a damselfly. That's where they breathe. Just like on the Breminator I was talking about. That's where they breathe. So you've got the 3 split tails, Got nice long legs, and I believe these legs are just a little bit long. And of course, you got to use your own judgment on how long you like your legs. I think these are a little long, and I tell you, the one problem with having legs that are too long is when you're casting, sometimes they'll spin and twist your line and weaken it just a little bit. And it's not as important on something as light as this, but when you get into some heavier flies, that spinning can really damage your tippet and leader. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now, the way you fish this guy is you let it sink really slow. If you want to catch bluegill, you got to be patient. You cast it out, and you notice the only weight I'm using is those bead chain eyes, and that's not a lot. And then you got this foam, which is going to kind of counteract it. It will sink. It's just going to sink very slow, and that's the trick to this fly and why it catches fish. Bluegill like their food to sink slowly. A natural insect doesn't drop like a rock in the water column. So you just cast it out, wait on it, wait for that line to dart, set your hook, and the fight is on. Well, that's it for today. We've got a great website you need to go check out, thetimebench.com. Lots of great links to other fly fishing sites, some good fish recipes. There's a bluegill bouillabaisse on there you might want to try sometime. A good friend of mine gave me. And I guess we'll be back next week with some new patterns. Until then, may your line always be tight with the fight.